Hi, and welcome to a special Angry Poodle edition of Newsmakers, on the air since 2014 as Santa Barbara's most popular, awarded, and only local news analysis and commentary show. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Thursday, April 6th, opening day at Oracle Park for the Giants tomorrow, so we're going a day early, and I am delighted to welcome Nick Welsh. We're going to go mano-a-mano or humano-humano or whatever the DEI version of that is, which I want to be on the right side of. Nick, thanks for taking the time. I know you're up to your eyeballs and stuff. But, before we jump into the local stuff, housing and ambulances and evictions and all kinds of stuff, I want to say a word and hear from you about your Angry Poodle column this week, which is about the fact that Donald Trump has been indicted in Manhattan, and you're kind of underwhelmed about the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I don't think Donald Trump isn't guilty as charged, and I don't buy the idea that he is innocent of everything. I just think that there's a number of indictments that are sort of floating out there in the ether that have a great deal of potential. And this one is the most highly technical, which is, the idea that he paid Stormy Daniels hush money is a closet version of a campaign finance donation, which has been falsified by business records by representing it in the business tally sheets as a legal expense. It is you have to squint at the charges. It's the idea that somebody is falsifying business expenses seems like it's a pretty low level offense when you have in comparison.
Really, what kind of country do we live in when you can't, have a cover up on your tax returns to pay off your mistress? I mean, come on.
It wasn't the
America or what?
It wasn't the tax returns. It was a business,
Well, no, but the tax returns were a couple of there were tax documents.
Okay, you know what? People falsify taxes all the time. The IRS goes after them and says, "Guess what? You owe us this penalty." Is that a felony criminal charge? I think that people are so giddy on our side of the aisle to see a stake put through Trump's heart that they're going to support anything. The problem I worry about is, the response from the other side. I think that this is a little bit like impeaching Bill Clinton for having had sex with Monica Lewinsky and lying about it. There were a lot of people who were extremely dubious about that then, and I kind of am dubious about this now. I think that Trump's role in the January 6th insurrection, uprising, putsch, I think is probably a better word, is far more offensive and obvious. I think trying to overturn the election results in Georgia is far more obvious and offensive and undemocratic. And I think that if you're going to come after an ex-president, and so many people are already predisposed, rightly or wrongly, to see it as politically motivated, the charge has to have maximum legitimacy as it possibly can have. And I think this one is going to be too easy for a lot of people to dismiss as a witch hunt, and a lot of people just to shrug off and not care. And I do think at this point, when you have the judiciary under such attack, you do want to maintain as much, I don't know, legitimacy of the judiciary. And if this looks like it's being weaponized as a buzzword is, I think there's a danger there. I mean, the MAGA 33% is not going to budge one way or the other. No. I'm not worried about them. I'm worried about the other 25% or 20%.
Well, all right. Let me. I agree with you that those are those three cases you mentioned are certainly broader and probably more serious. However, I do think this is a very serious case, and that your column is therefore completely wrong You know, first of all, that's, you know, 30,000 feet. A former president of the United States has been indicted. You know, Trump over the last 8 years has so lowered our standards that that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it kind of is. But here's the thing. I don't think the prosecutor has put, you know, I don't think he's put all his cards out there yet. I don't think we really know. First of all, if you look at it, it isn't just Stormy Daniels. There are 3 people
Right.
that paid off, 3 different cases: a doorman, Karen McDougal, a former Playboy model, and Stormy Daniels. Secondly, he asserts, and we haven't seen the evidence for this yet, that this was all in furtherance of stealing the election. So what he needs to do, and what he will do, presumably, as the case goes on, these are state charges. He needs what our friends in the prosecutorial community might call a step up. He's got to go to a federal charge. Now, what's the federal charge? We don't know yet. He didn't say, and he said, I didn't say yet. It could be campaign finance. It could be taxes. It could be something else that we don't even know of. But I was impressed with the, you know, it's not just Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen and that thing. There's much more to this.
Yeah, but the idea that
and being in league, you know, with the National Enquirer, you know, for the catch and kill on all of these stories. And I think here's what's important about Stormy Daniels. Look at the date. It was right after October 7th. And October 7th, as you recall, 2016, is when the Access TV, TV Hollywood thing came out. And it looked like his campaign was, you know, on the brink. Republicans were running away. And if that had come out at that point, it very well could have been the second shoe to drop, or the last shoe, or how many shoes they need. I don't know. But anyway, I think there's more to it. I think it's a serious case. And I think the other thing, politically, the judge has said, you know, take 4 months to you know, do your motions. And obviously, you know, Trump's going to do a dismissal motion. The prosecution is asking for a January 2024 trial date, and the judge is like, maybe we'll do it in April. So first of all, it's going to be old news by the time the trial comes along. 2, I think the trial could be really interesting, and it's very possible that we'll see indictments in any of those other 3 cases, or all, before then.
I hear that, but you know, I guess what I worry about is that, you know, a grand jury is notoriously easy to get an indictment from. I mean, there is that old line: I can get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich. And you know, you don't need a unanimous grand jury to return an indictment. You need a simple majority. You don't have a defense role in a grand jury. When you take it to an actual juror of 12 people with
In
2
Manhattan.
officers in Manhattan, and you know, all you need is one to say no. And all you need is one to say, well, you know, that could be, but it could be something else. And you and I both have covered enough trials to have seen instances with our own eyes where the juror says, this violates my sense of what's right and wrong and fair. And it has nothing to do with the laws that you laid out in this courtroom and the rules, etc. And so I think, you know, there are certain things that you cannot afford to swing and miss at. And the fact that this has never been tested before, and that you only need one, and how easy it is to get a grand jury indictment relative to a conviction, makes me nervous.
Yeah, I hear that. You know, again, I think the trial is going to be something. I think the only evidence that he showed were the 34 documents, which are clearly, you know, they're erroneously, intentionally filed and stated, which is right there. There's 34 misdemeanor counts. Ordinarily, it would be a misdemeanor. So the question is, how is he going to use that?
But what's interesting is those counts all took place after the election. So all of this stuff, so he's basically being accused of, you know, scrambling the election results, but the election had already happened. And so now he's going to be charged as a felony for things that happened after the election. I don't know if that's a sort of quibbly detail that might get in the way for at least one juror, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, the documents are the cover-up, though. The yet to be stated federal crime is the actual crime.
Let me ask you that. The crime is that he didn't file this as a campaign finance document.
Maybe it is. I don't know. Nobody knows what it is. And he wouldn't
Is
say
paying hush money a crime? No. Is trying to suppress information that would be harmful to you before an election a crime?
it could be. I think it could be. I think it could be. All right. We don't want to spend
Right.
our whole time on that, but it's interesting. And
Yeah,
this
it's-
debate is going on. And I'll tell you something else. This is because I'm going to get the last word on this. What this shows me is guys like you, and you are not alone across the nation in saying, what the heck, you know, the kind of people who believe in liberal democracy versus the people who are defending Trump, which is to say autocratic authoritarians. It's asymmetrical warfare, because you're saying, you know, well, what about this technical thing? And this is not a perfect case. And they're like, who cares? You know, I mean, it's like, it's totally a different standard that.
I get your point. I would just say there's a whole lot of people who are not, white supremacist Proud Boys, who may have voted for Trump because any number of reasons.
Right.
Those are the people I'm worried about, not the Proud Boy supporters.
Right. But Trump just lies. I mean, he lies, his mouth, his lips are
If his lips are moving, he's lying.
So it's really not a fair in a way. All right, let's talk about a couple of big local stories. First of all, your piece on the ambulance contract, which the supervisors gave a victory to the local firefighters, and taking the exclusive contract away from AMR, which has held it forever. You describe it as Solomon-like, splitting the baby in half. But my question is, they moved everything, including the contract decision-making power from public health to county fire. How does AMR get anything out of this? I don't understand.
AMR will still have ambulances on the road. It will still be able to do business. It will answer to a different entity, and one that is far more skeptical. This is the fire departments, and
so they're coming under their ambulances are coming under the authority of the fire department.
All that has yet to be worked out exactly how that happens, but the fire department here, the big thing that's making this all possible is that the fire departments, all the fire agencies of the county are forming a regional dispatch center, which has never existed before. And groundbreaking ceremony for that is going to be April 25th. It should be completed within a year. And when that happens, you will have the dispatchers will be able to look at their screen and see every single fire engine and every single call for service and say, here's where the calls for service
including AMR.
Including AMR. And say, this is where the closest resource is, and how do we get it to the person in the fastest time.
But we don't even know, because they said it was proprietary information, as I understand, how many ambulances AMR has out there. We do know how many local firefighters have out there, which is what, 45, 46, something like that. So I'm just having trouble. Maybe it's a failure of imagination. I just see the AMR guys kind of, trying to scrape up, run over squirrels or something on the street, because they're not going to get any work.
They'll get work, but the question is how much, and really there's a lot of details that have to be worked out. I think it was clearly, I said the baby got cut in half, but I would say that the fire guys got by far the much bigger half. It
So
was a,
all halves are not equal. Yes.
yeah, and you know, watching the proceedings, the fire guys, and I shouldn't say fire guys because technically they're not, but typically when you see it, you know, they don't have a lot of women out in the forefront of these events. They completely rolled AMR. I mean,
Well,
this
they
was
were extraordinarily disciplined about their message and everything,
their
right?
message, their, you know, that the breadth of people. They had Gerd and Pete Giordano showing up. Let's go for the firefighters. These are people who you don't see them as stooges of the fire department. You had Susan Petrovich, an attorney associated with development interests. Let's hear it for the firefighters. You had Ryan Borgatello of the Borgatello family that owns Marburg. Let's hear it for the fire guys. You had the unions. Let's hear it for the fire guys. You had Randy Rouse. Let's hear it for the fire guys. AMR, they had the union representing the EMTs. They had a couple of guys from AMR, and it was, you know, I mean, the one question that they did raise that I think people need to pay attention to is the concern that this is going to create an element of chaos into the situation. How do these two entities dance together effectively so that people who are in need of an ambulance are not falling through the cracks? The fire guys will tell you with great confidence and they're convincing that's not going to be a problem. But you know, whenever you introduce a new system and a new way of doing things, there's always glitches, and you
Yeah.
don't want to be that glitch.
And then the other thing that really sort of struck me as Supervisor Lavanino, Steve Lavanino, asked a question, which is, you know, he said, look, there was a request for proposals. AMR won both of them. You know, why are we doing there? He asked Hartwig, he asked Chief Hartwig that question. Well, I mean, what's the answer to that?
Hartwig didn't answer that question, and Hartwig wasn't going to answer that question. The fire guys believe that the deal was fixed from the very beginning. That's the way it was structured.
Why fixed? Why? Because there are former AMR executives.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying that
On the
the county
decision
department, that the people immediately involved in the oversight of this process were former AMR employees, one of whom has since gone back to AMR to take a job somewhere else at better pay. They were pretty much told, don't go there. We don't want to hear that kind of talk. The supervisors wanted to give it to the firefighters. They think, how can the process, here's one of the questions that the supervisors were frustrated with in the RFP process. The fire guys are saying, we're not gonna take a bunch of profit and give it to our corporate overlords on Wall Street.
I mean, AMR is owned by a hedge fund.
Right. So we're not going to give it to our hedge fund overlords. We're going to take whatever revenues we generate and pour it back into the system. For the supervisors, that was huge. And the fact that that was not given greater consideration in the RFP boggled their minds. It does not compute. Never got a good answer. The other thing in the ratings, AMR actually did better than the fire guys in terms of emergency response. And again, you think.
So the firefighters were basically saying the fix is in, but this was an unprecedented double appeal, right? Because didn't their appeal already get turned down once?
It was, so AMR, to be clear, and this is what they said, we went through the RFP process, the bidding process, fair and square. We were rated, we got 300 points more than those guys. It wasn't close. We got 300 points more. We clobbered them. They appealed once. That was rejected. They appealed their appeal. That was rejected. Strike three, you're out. We're in. You know, ratify our contract. 5-zip. The supervisor said, So I don't know if this is going to be litigation.
Well, that the AMR, and we should note for those inside baseball players who like this kind of thing that behind the scenes for AMR was Molly Culver, the uber political consultant who has handled many things, including former Mayor Kathy Murillo and cannabis. So she must have, sold herself by saying, "Look, I know the supervisor, I know the players," but she got skunked.
Well, I have no idea what Molly's role actually was. I know that she was there and she was working for him. I kind of think she was pretty skunked. I think anybody who they would have hired would have been skunked. I think what you saw on Tuesday was a culmination of 10 years of organizing by the fire chiefs, who you have 7 fire chiefs who are actually all working together. They're getting the support of the Goleta City Council. They're getting Mayor Randy Rouse. They're lining up support every which way. When it went to the supervisors, it wasn't just the supervisor saying, "This is what we really want to do." They had marshaled the support. Politically, there's that stereotype. You go from being a firefighter to being mayor of Chicago. You saw why in Tuesday. I mean, these guys are politically very good.
What about the allegation that this is, and this was in the AMR statement, which was, kind of threatening litigation, that there's conflicts of interest, and this was all about trying to boost pensions for, chiefs and everyone else.
Well, it was interesting.
Is there any substance to that?
I'm sure down the road we'll see it. We'll be arguing about this, but it was telling that it was Supervisor Bob Nelson, who was perhaps the most conservative member of the Board of Supervisors, who addressed that one head on. And he just said, I'm hearing all this about that, this is pension spiking and all this kind of stuff. Let me tell you what, Chief Hartwig is not getting any more money from this deal, and he's going to get a whole lot more responsibility.
Yeah, it's hard to see. I mean, I guess you could make that argument. Maybe if they were going to hire a bunch of new people or something, and maybe they will, but presumably
they'll have to.
They would be AMR guys who would be, getting paid more. Yeah, and your point about the 10-year campaign is right on. And another behind the scenes figure in all this, of course, was former city fire chief Pat McElroy, also former firefighters union leader Pat McElroy.
Well, it would be worth noting that Pat McElroy also advised Randy Rouse in his mayoral campaign. So,
but Pat has been, we have to say, on a substantive matter, he's been a leader in this effort to,
regionalize
a force multiplier by coordinating and reorganizing, emergency services and specifically fire departments, and everybody helping everybody, and the cell phone transformation. He was the leader in that. So, yeah, interesting who was behind the scenes. This is a big deal, $1 billion contract or something, I guess.
Yeah, 1.4 on paper. About who knows how much of that they actually collect, but on paper it's a $1.4 billion contract over a 10-year period.
Yeah. Wow. Because insurance pays for your ambulance rides, and they're not cheap, I can attest. Especially if you're not on Medicare yet. All right. Let's talk about these evictions in IV, which we talked about last week somewhat. 500 at least people getting kicked out of 2 buildings in Isla Vista because some Midwest investment bros bought them. Has really turned into a huge story. And I know today you saw a little bit, at least, of this emergency supervisors meeting, specifically on this issue. What were the supervisors saying? What are they going to do about this?
Well, the eviction here, it happened about 3 weeks ago, and there's 550 tenants But the number of people who actually live there could be as much as 1,000. It's all over the map. These 3 buildings out in Isla Vista that are called the Sweeps, and this operation out of Chicago called Core Spaces bought them up and said, we're going to have to evict you all because we're going to be making massive renovations. This was a tsunami. This was, we've been hearing these sorts of stories writ small for a long time, and oh, this is a problem we got to deal with. This was like the tsunami that hit Japan.
Renovictions.
Renovictions. And so this Tuesday, about 30 people went to the Board of Supervisors, many of whom were tenants there, saying, please help us. And at that point, the plea was have an special emergency session. At that time, the county counsel's office was saying anything that we do will not be retroactive. It will only be prospective. In the meantime, attorneys from the Legal Aid Foundation and other tenants' rights advocates have put together, put their thinking hats on and said, no, actually, until the eviction is served, not the notice given, but until the eviction is actually executed,
which is sometime in August, right?
Which would be sometime in the summer. The county just cause eviction ordinance can be appealed to, and the county can intervene to try to stop them. And to be perfectly fair, I missed a fair amount of today's meeting, so the key details I can't talk about, but they have pledged to act now and pledged to prevent further ones of these from happening.
But is the county's just eviction ordinance, however, as I understand, is not as strong as the city's just eviction, right?
The city just strengthened theirs. So if in the city of Santa Barbara, if a landlord says, hey, I got to make a bunch of changes, sorry, dude, you got to go, the city says, show me the permit that you're applying for. What are you doing? Because a lot of times landlords, or some landlords, will say that when all they want to do is put in a coat of paint and get somebody new in so they can raise the rent more. Now, we have heard from the mom and pop landlords saying, we're getting painted with a bad paintbrush. So many of us have been extremely restrained. We charge actually less than we could if we wanted to gouge. And, we are subsidizing, the middle class such as it still exists, or the working class such as it still exists in Santa Barbara, because we are showing restraint. But these big operators have no restraint. And they are in a big hurry. And, if it's 550 or 1,000 people, that is way more than the current rental market can accommodate. And the supervisors heard tearful testimony and from people who were very determined and effective. We are not numbers. We are not numbers on a spreadsheet. We are human beings, and our lives, this is doing violence to us in a very big way. We have kids in the local schools. We have jobs. We are going to be upended. I mean, one of the reasons I didn't get to watch it is I was having Hilda Maldonado, school superintendent, came by the paper for a meeting, and she was telling us how the number of families, school attendance is down, and not because people are going to private school. School attendance is down, and is down more than it is statewide, because people can't afford to live here and they're leaving town. And
people with kids
in the school. And it makes it really hard to figure out, like, how do you organize a school district when you don't know how many students are going to be there because they're leaving town. So this all led to a much broader debate between the supervisors. Steve Lavanino kind of led it off saying, well, hey, I know what housing insecurity looks like. I've lived in a mobile home in my life. I lived in a motel in my life, and I wasn't sure where I was going to be living at various times of my life. So I hear you and I feel you, but I want to hear from the NIMBYs saying, go slow on housing. We need to be pedal to the metal in the supply versus demand argument. Josh Williams joined him with that, saying we need to, open up the supply. Joe Hardman said, well, look, I'd like to quibble with you here on a significant detail. What we're seeing is a shifting economic phenomenon that is new to the international world and is definitely being felt in force in Santa Barbara, where people, big pension funds and hedge fund investors who used to invest in mortgages and things like that are now investing in rental real estate, and they are buying real estate properties, and they are managing them, and they are milking them like cows. And she said, you guys can talk supply and demand all you want, but the fact of the matter is 18 to 23% of units in some markets are second homes, are rental vacation rentals that aren't being rented out. And so they're sitting there vacant. So it's not enough to say, build it, build it. If you build it, they may or may not come. You have to have constraints.
And unless it's specifically affordable and
Right.
there's regulations around that, it's just, it's going to get higher and higher, the rents.
And, as the county goes into its housing element, it's very clear, there's going to be very black and white for traditional Santa Barbara environmentalists whose mantra had been, we need to live within our resources. You don't want too much traffic congestion. You want to be able to enjoy the views. We are shifting gears at a breakneck pace, and all of that stuff is out the door, out the window, and, overboard. And it's housing. And there are those people who have asked the question, myself being one of them, Kristen Sneddon another, where are the guarantees and the assurances that this will be affordable? Because, you can build a nice, cute 700 square foot thing that a architect will say, this is affordable by design, but then you see somebody paying $3,500 for it, a nice 1-bedroom unit or a utility. So affordable by design is kind of the tooth fairy and the Easter bunny, and it doesn't happen. So it's still part of the narrative.
Yeah, the unintended consequences of social engineering.
I would say the unintended consequences of having too many people wanting to move to coastal California.
Yeah, and they all can't, and it's hard to. Well, speaking of running roughshod over slow growth things, real quick before we close, you have a piece about this new hotel that's going to go up in the funk zone. That sounds like it's 300 feet high or something. It's a blockbuster, right?
Let's just say this: this is epicentered at Yanonali and Garden Street, and it is. But they're talking about combining 6 lots, so it would be 4.5 acres at the periphery of the so-called funk zone. And I think
high end hotel, or
they say mid-high, but I don't know what
that's what, $500 a night.
That'd probably be closer to 700. About 130 of the units are going to be set aside for
family long-term
for people who want to stay, for a week or two. And they'll have nice big kitchens and, roll-away sofa beds, and, it'll be set for like family reunions who can come to town and hang out for,
but not long-term rentals.
Not long-term rentals. And then you're going to have your regular sort of more boutique-y stuff. And they have something in there in the fine print called a media salon. I don't know what a media salon is.
Media salon?
Yeah. They're going to have lots of spas and weight rooms.
Oh, I thought it meant that you and me and McFadden were going to have coffee. Okay. And
I think that would be good. They're going to have us in there. So, have you read the New York Times today? I'm shocked.
Let me talk about the future of the news media. Yeah, go ahead.
It's big, and it's big in a place where, like, if you look at the funk zone, part of the charm and the possibility of it has been, it's been, imagine dropping a rock on a pane of glass and all the little, triangles and squiggles, that's a parcel of land. They sort of jigsaw puzzles together, and people build tiny little structures on them, out of which an eccentric array of businesses sprouted up that were utilitarian for a long time, and now are all wine tasting rooms.
Yeah.
And you've got that, and then you've got Neil DePaola's, mega thing going on elsewhere in the funk zone. And I just think the funk zone has, it is going to be changing extremely fast. And
Yeah.
it will no longer have the same character.
But I think you mentioned 50-foot heights in that story, no?
I think 50 foot is the highest it goes. And that's sort of like, with the weather vane.
I mean, that's different.
But most of it is 45 feet or lower, and it's a 3- and 2-story building, story building. So
Of course, one has to ask, while we're all panicking about, or most of us are panicking about, we got to build more housing. I mean, we're going to keep building more hotels. I mean, it's.
Well, the city council, they looked at trying to ban the construction of new hotels on land zoned for housing. It didn't pass. I kind of thought that was a good idea, because hotels are easier, cheaper, more remunerative and tempting, but do we really need more hotels as much as we need housing?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right. Well, I don't know what a conservative is anymore. It's like a MAGA person, but I think traditionally, what did William Buckley say? A conservative is someone who stands athwart of history yelling "stop" when no one is inclined to do so. So I guess I'm moving more in that direction. This doesn't seem like we've got a handle on exactly where we're going.
It feels more reactive, and it's sort of like we're flooring the gas before we know which way we're steering the car.
Yeah.
And
yeah, throwing spaghetti.
We'll have more unintended consequences.
Throwing spaghetti at the wall, as my late father loved to do. All right, Nick Welsh, the Angry Poodle, thank you so much for all your insights and your institutional knowledge and all you do. And thank you all for watching. And we will see you next time on Newsmakers.